We have a legend to my right. What is your connection to this, Andy?
My connection? I was gone for a day out.
Yes, what's going on? It's your boy Ace. I'm here with the ACLT, and today we've got a very special roundtable discussion to find out exactly why black people shy away from living organ donation. Myself, I got an organ donation in 2021, and I got a panel behind me that have all been affected by living organ donation, yeah? So we're gonna find out exactly what we need to do to get them numbers up. Let's have the conversation. Okay, so let's start the conversation. Like I said, everybody on the table today has all been affected in some way, shape or form by living kidney organ donation. We all know why we're here. We know what we need to talk about. But for the base level, people that don't know, why do black patients need black organs or black kidneys?
I'm Rajesh Sivaprakasam. I'm a transplant surgeon from BARTS NHS Trust. Kidney transplant is a condition which is sort of becoming more and more prevalent. And one of the best treatments to have for kidney failure, what we call as an end-stage kidney failure, is to have a kidney transplant. I think the key thing here is to receive how we start that conversation about the transplant, and also empower them to say, these are the options you have, and give them time to consider them. I mean, as ethnic minority, we are the most hesitant, particularly men. You know, we are hesitant to talk about it to the families and loved ones. So how can we make that conversation easier for them to open up?
How bad is the problem at the moment in regards to the numbers? How many people are waiting and how many people are donating their kidneys?
My name is Dela Idowu. Although unfortunately I wasn't able to donate, I set up Gold, Gift of Living Donation. Even if you just go to the stats of last year's financial year, and these are NHS stats, we had 25 black living donor transplants compared to almost 800 transplants from the white community. So that is a huge disparity there. So we have to ask ourselves, you know, with clinicians and the community, well, what can we do to really address that disparity? It's how do family members now take up and say, yes, I want to come forward as a donor. Because the truth of the matter is we're not asking someone to go to the blood donor centre and have donate blood, or to have a swab and we're asking someone to have an operation that they don't need, to take a big risk that they don't have. And that is that fear that a lot of family members, and often they say, well, what if I need my kidney? And what we ask them, well, actually, why don't you just speak to a live donor transplant, a live donor, somebody from your community who's gone through that whole process, has come out and is living their best life now. And what we find, that is a game changer. But we still, I mean, if you look at those figures, we still have a lot of work to do.
The reason for the matching, when we talk about the kidney, is really the way the kidney is matched for anybody who needing a kidney is by the blood group, and then the genetic type called what we call as HLA typing. So therefore, that is what impacts us on the type of donors where you can get the kidney from. When a white person needs a kidney, and there are a lot of white donors, they are better matched by the HLA, not by the blood group alone. Whereas when it comes to others, all of us, there the difficulty is the HLA matching is the one which makes it difficult because there's not enough of us coming forward.
Now, I've already heard stuff about speaking to family members and conversations. Donna, as somebody that's waiting, is that a conversation you've had with your family?
I'm Donna. I'm a dialysis patient. Been on dialysis for 11 years and I've been a renal patient for 26 years. Initially, one of my siblings said that they were quite scared to donate to me. Right. I'm scared to donate. I don't know what's involved. I'm just really scared of living with one kidney. And you respect that. You say, OK, at the moment, I have no kidneys and I'm not even a transplanted kidney in me and I'm living.
How do you broach that subject? Did you go out for a dinner? Did you bring it up at a christening? Did you send a group text? How do you broach that subject of organ donation?
Initially, when I started dialysis, it was like all my family knew I was on dialysis. So I'm one where it's quite difficult to ask for a transplant initially.
Very.
And it's not like saying, can I borrow a bag of sugar? I want your kidney. You know, it's not, and more or less, I need your kidney. I just got on with things. And then there was a time where my lines didn't work. So I needed to change my line and I was running out of access for my tessio line and fistulas, etc. So the doctor said to me, OK, you need a new line and this is your last chance in having a decent line. So I put it out to my family. I said, OK, guys, I need a transplant. I need, there's no access on me. I've got no access left. A couple of friends said, OK, Donna, I would like to give you a transplant. OK. And you say to your family, OK, I need a transplant. And nothing comes. So there is that I would give you a transplant, but that's where it stops.
How does that feel? Like, is there frustration or anger towards your family? Like, how does that make you feel as somebody, as part of this family?
If I'm honest with you, no.
No, okay.
If you can't fix something and if you can't do something about nothing, keep pushing and keep moving forward. You go for dialysis, you come home, you look well, you go out, there's nothing wrong with you from their side, but then you say you feel poorly and then they say, oh, Donna, are you okay? Do you want me to look after you? Do you want this? Okay, and that's where it stops. And it's like a cycle. And I guess it's how do we get out of this circle and cycle?
I know that when I was on dialysis for 3 years and I went out of my way to look like I was fine and everything was going on. I was doing 6 radio shows a week, I'd DJ twice a week, I'd try and do everything that I would usually do. Is that something within our community where we don't want to look like we're suffering or we don't want to look like we're in need? Is that part of the problem? How was it for you, Andy?
I'm Andrew, another one who's received a kidney. I was very fortunate when it comes to speaking about transplants and things like that because everyone said we'd do it. I remember sitting down with a consultant, my ex-wife was in there with my nephew, and he said, look, the time's come, you're going to need a transplant. I'm looking at my nephew, and I can see what he feels like. He's looking at me and said, my uncle's in his position, he's been fit all his life, and I've got to look at my uncle like this. So I could actually feel his pain then. So must have been, a month or so after that, he just said to me, I can't watch you like this anymore. He said, right, you're going to have my kidney.
I've actually seen African men who are on dialysis who have not told their family that they're ill. So they're not having that conversation. And it's like, he can't be seen to be sick. He's the head of the household. So if you can't even talk about your diagnosis as a start, how are you even going to have a living donor?
Sure. I can relate to that. I didn't let a lot of people know for the first year of dialysis, and I felt like maybe I'd miss out on opportunities. I didn't want anybody to worry, and I now know that was the worst thing to do. What is it like hearing Andy's story and you being in your position when you found out that you had renal failure?
Shae Hutchinson. I've had 2 transplants, and I'm a professional footballer. I can't lie, I didn't want to tell anyone. Right. I kept that to myself because I had hearing loss as well, and I don't I didn't want people to know that I have hearing loss. I didn't really want to wear my hearing aids. Luckily, 2018 is when I got it from my dad. He stepped forward and he was a match. They came in my room when I was recovering and they said that it didn't go to plan. I will be needing a new one. It's not easy, you can't just get a transplant just like that. So I'm thinking, football, how am I going to get back? But I did manage to get back, worked hard, got work twice as hard. I had another one come in 2020, and that was the shared scheme.
I'm Simon, I'm actually Shae's uncle, and I'm a live kidney donor. So my sister, Shae's mum, she's on dialysis currently, and she needed a new kidney. And initially, because Shae just received the kidney from his dad, I was like, okay, so I'll buddy up with, because I wasn't a match for my sister, but I'll buddy up and we'll go through the kidney sharing scheme together. Yeah, once we found out that Shae's kidney transplant hadn't gone well, I didn't even think about it. It was like, well, yeah, of course, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. I think it has to be initiated by the person requiring it because I think as an individual, unless something's affecting you personally, you tend to not think about whether it be going on a holiday or giving the kidney. If it's not something that's going to affect you personally, you don't think about it. And I think that's one of the problems we have is, like I said, it's that initial conversation starting.
One thing that doesn't get spoken about a lot, and it's definitely something that I had an issue with, was the fear of what you went through, the first rejection. Yeah. So like Dela said, essentially we're asking somebody to go for an operation that they don't need. What if that person goes through the operation that they don't need and then it doesn't work?
I think with me as well, my first one was my dad.
Yeah.
When he came in and they said that it didn't go to plan, like, it didn't go well. It broke me. I felt like it was my fault. So that's why when I went to go and get back to football, I just, like, I couldn't let him down.
I did say earlier on that we only had 25 black living donor transplants last year, but I think we also have, as a community, need to stop saying, well, black people don't donate, because they do. We've almost got almost 600 black living donors in the UK. So those are the stories that we need to change. We've just set up a black living donor choir. They're all living donors. And I think that positive message, when they actually visibly see black people looking well, doing well, that again is a game changer.
And again, I think a lot of black people do want to donate.
Yes.
It's the knowledge around the donation that is lacking.
Exactly. And also take the fear away by demystifying about the donation. You know, I mean, it's amazing you're sitting here and you told us that you ran a marathon last year. I mean, that information people need to know that you can lead a life.
Yes, we have to hear from Simon. I didn't know that you had run a marathon.
Yeah.
How was your life after donating your organ to your nephew?
You know, I've not seen any change.
Okay.
Any change. And that's one of the things I wanted to put out there when I decided to run the marathon, was to let people know, you know what, you can donate and you can still lead a normal life afterwards, because that is a big fear of people.
And with regards to the donation of the kidney, I mean, we can confidently say in UK that in the last 40 years we haven't had a single death after live donation.
Right.
And that is thousands of transplantation. But still, that information has to be made easier for the person to come forward. And also in Britain, anybody who donates, they are looked after for life by the hospital, not by the GP. We look after them for life. And if in the unfortunate event they get a kidney failure with a single kidney, they go on the top of the waiting list.
I wanted to bring in one question, and that is, you can't talk about living donation within the Black Afro-Caribbean community without talking about faith. And I'm sure you've had patients in front of you who you're talking about living donation, and they're like, well, you're just talking rubbish. I'm going to go to the church. I'm going to get my healing. Exactly. What do you do in those circumstances?
You have to understand the cultural need, other beliefs, and everything has to come together. But if they can agree that the organ donation is a safe thing to do, it's the right thing to do based on the different faiths and religions, that's one of the processes which was started about 10 years ago. That has made a significant impact with regards to sort of how people come forward and how they are supported by, I was saying earlier that the home first or the loved one and then the hospital. I had people where they came forward and we said to them, you can't donate. They said, no, I want to do it. So we said, I'm sorry, we can't. So we sent them for a second opinion. We didn't say, oh no, you're wrong. We sent them to another unit in UK and we said to them, talk to them. Because the burden of a person living with another person who donates, with something going wrong in them, it'll be the most horrendous thing to live with. So the cultural organizations and everything is more engaged in organ donation, mainly live donation of kidneys. And also we as clinical teams, we are more aware of the need to demystify the processes, the support what is available for the person who donates and the person who receives. And what ACLT and other organizations they do is they start the demystifying process. I add to them. I don't start it. I think the start comes from patient-facing organizations and patients who have gone through it.
I think like culture, religion and culture goes back years, and especially like the culture, black culture, we're very close to it as well. And I always told this story when I was growing up and I wanted to fill out my driver's license form and you get to the donor bit and my mum's like, no, we don't do that. So like, that's from her culture. That's where she's got that from. That's the generation that she's from. And how do we turn that around?
It's a lot. It's a lot to, as I said before, to ask somebody for their kidney. And I guess if you ask 2 or 3 times for a kidney and nobody's coming forward, it makes you think and it doesn't want you to, you're not able to ask again. So therefore you do get on with things. And I guess it's until you get to a stage where your access is becoming limited, that pushes you to ask again.
When I went through the situation I was breaking it down to them, my mum and dad were kind of like saying, yeah, I'm starting to understand now because that's why you're still here.
Right.
So it's understanding. And now I understand the situation even more now, especially in the black community. It's for me to voice those opinions. It's not what you believe it is. you could give someone else life after you're no longer here. That's what you need to understand.
We haven't necessarily spoke about the mistrust, which is a huge thing when it comes to the Black community and the mistrust they have with certain organisations. What are some of the things that you guys are hearing in regards to pushback about the mistrust that they have?
I think, first thing to do as a clinician is that to accept if somebody doesn't trust me as a healthcare provider. And the second thing, what we started doing, which is across the country, a lot of the units are doing, is that to allocate a dedicated person, this is a continuity of care. With regards to sort of their follow-up, further advice, we have a very clear approach that before transplant, there is a very dedicated clinician for that individual patient. Post-transplant in the early period, specific person, and for the long term. But I totally agree that it is one of the issues where there's a lot of efforts has been gone in from the NHS with the patient organizations and organizations such as ACLT to coming together to see whether we can help people to trust the system. But what we do now is to develop that relationship so the trust becomes better, so the advice given is received much more easily.
I'm gonna throw this to you because one of the things that often comes to me, and it is trust, but I've got to mix trust and care. And a lot of the times it's like, well, you don't actually really care about Black kidney patients. And we see that often. And we did some training for some clinicians. It's like, well, this is the best way in how you can engage, with Black people. And we started right from that consulting room, and it's how you make us feel and perceive. For example, it's a Monday morning, and you're coming into the reception, and you're calling Joe. Oh, hi Joe, how are you? How was your weekend? How was the football in Manchester? So you've had that rapport, you have that connection, and you go into the consulting room. So you've built up that trust, you've built up the rapport. When it comes to a Black patient, you come into the waiting room, Andy, no eye contact, nothing. How can you stop that? How can you stop that from happening? Because that really is unconscious bias. Yeah. We read people's body language, and your body language tells us that we don't trust you because you don't care for us. Yeah. So it really needs to start from you. How can we then build that trust and break it down?
That's extremely important. And I think you get the one chance. The first meeting is the one chance you get to start building the relationship. There's no second chance. If the person doesn't trust you in the first few minutes, when you shake their hand, you lost that person. There is no other part of the world where we think we walk in and you expect the other person to trust you. And in healthcare, it's even more important. So acknowledging that is the first thing. Second thing is really to understand more and more as the relationship develops between individuals who are part of a larger team. And of course, it's an ongoing work, what we are pursuing and we need to do. Specifically coming to sort of kidney donation and transplantation, it's even more important because here, we are talking about genetic mismatches based on the race, which can affect waiting time of somebody who needs a kidney.
How much do you put on patients for that though? Because I think it's a lot for us to expect the NHS to change the perception of Black people. When we have patients, we've all been in hospital for our renal failure, we could be talking to Black people about, yo, look, they've treated me well up until this point. They're helping me. I've been having dialysis 3 times a week. I've never had any issues. I trust them, so why don't you not trust them?
I think it's quite a difficult one, and I think it's an individual
Right.
thing as well. For my renal journey, I have had ups and I've had downs. I've had trust and I've had mistrust.
Oh, really?
For instance, the team of consultants that I have at the moment, I do trust them because they're very transparent with me. On the other hand, I have heard stories where other patients have had an appalling relationship with their consultants. So they just go along with certain things and they may see disparities within the renal community, whereas they see something, okay, I don't trust this particular nurse, she's lied to me. So they've taken that and have put a blanket over all the clinicians. Yeah. So it's quite hard.
What are young people saying? I mean, you're quite young, Shae, of course. Yeah. How are they responding to what you've been through, and what are their opinions on organ donation at the moment?
Been through the transplant now, and they've seen how I've come out, and I've come out strong, and then they see that makes them wanna feel like when they step forward, that there's like nothing to be scared of, you know.
Do we need more people of your stature and more people that are in the public eye to be speaking about this?
Yeah, well, of course we do. In our community, a lot of it's about masculinity as men, as you know. So if you're sick, no one want to talk about being sick. I mean, man up, get on with it. Now, once I got myself to a stage that I understood it was by myself, I was starting to say, why am I going to let other people go through this journey by themselves? Because I know how bad the journey was for me. And people look at me as if like, oh yeah, he's unbelievable, Andy Cole's come out and spoke about it. You know where I got my strength from? Those people.
Okay.
I drew my strength from them to know that my life can continue doing what I'm doing, and I can help people in the same position as myself, being in the profile that I'm in.
I think black living donors have got to be visible.
Exactly.
I understand a lot of them don't want to be. They've done what they want to do and they don't want to talk about it. But I think that it's not the clinicians, it's those who have got those lived experience that need to be visible, that need to share their stories so other people can hear, you know, the benefits. So it's how can we in this forum today really almost have a call to action to say, well, actually, there are black people who are living donors. This is their stories and this is their experience.
I know that when I went public, which was like a year and a half after I started dialysis, a lot of people had no idea I was on dialysis. So we're upset that there's not enough donors, but people don't necessarily know they can help, or they don't necessarily know what people that look like them are actually going through.
It's about, you know, understanding and education, because you know what a lot of people don't realise is that, you know, the remaining kidney that you have once as a live donor, you've given one away, it increases in size. It's the amazing thing about the human body. It increases in size to compensate for the loss of the one that you've got. So at the moment, it was in January I had my last checkup, and my kidney function was at 85%. Wow. That was just on the one kidney. So it's facts like that if you put it out there, I think can only help.
There might be people out there that are just giving blood regularly and like, oh, if at some point they might want to be an organ donor, and they might just feel like, oh, at some point I might get a phone call to say that I'm a match. What are some of the things that people need to know that they don't know, that maybe they've got the wrong idea about, or like just things that we know as people that are in it that the general public may not know?
It's important to say that actually we do have quite a lot of black people that come forward, but then you've got high blood pressure, you've got diabetes that stops a lot of us that can donate. But I think it's important to, on the genetic testing of Apollo 1, I know it sounds quite scientific, but I think that's something that a lot of living donors that do come forward from the black Afro-Caribbean community don't understand, and I think that you probably shed a little bit of light on that.
You know, there is a lot on the YouTube and Google and everything, so we just need to be careful in what we look at. And also, I think what we recommend is that look at your own hospital's information more than other things.
Potential donors, they have their so-called life in check. So they're thinking about, okay, so I've got a really good job, I've got the kids, and I've got this. If I go in and give this kidney, who's going to look after the kids? What about my job? What if this happens? How much time can I get off work? All that information isn't readily available for potential donors. Coming up now and speaking to other potential donors, they're not aware of anything like that. And they're fearing, you know, okay, what if I lose my job because I'm giving you a donor? Who's going to pay my mortgage? Who's going to do this? This is how much time I can take off work. What if I spend so much time in hospital after my donation? What happened?
There's also that financial aspect of it. I know NHSBT do give back some sort of money, but even just coming up to the hospital with you, I probably can't afford to take a day off work just to come up for a blood test. So that then happens. So you're sitting then in the consulting room. You really need a loved one to come with you to
You know, you're still able to do the same things you do. If I can stand up and be a so-called poster boy and like say, look, you know, I'm living proof that you can. It's good to donate. Then whatever I can do.
Shae, as somebody that's received a donor, how's your life been post getting your second kidney transplant?
It's been a roller coaster. It's been a journey. But going through it, like it doesn't stop you from doing things that you were doing before. I just feel like a lot of people are scared about what life will be like afterwards. Would I be able to get back to my job? Would I be able to do this after? You would.
I think on that one, I think if you're younger, you view it differently.
Okay. Yeah. Well, how do you view it, Andy?
Tough. It was tough at the start when you get told that you won't be able to do certain things and age catches up anyway. Right. Yeah. Mentally, that messed with me. I knew straight away I won't be able to do what I wanted to do. I know for me, deep down inside, yeah, I'm not where I want to be. But I have to compensate and understand what I'm going through and just work with it.
That initial time you was told you needed a transplant, how would you suggest people speak to their family? How did you speak to yours?
When I went through it, I refused to tell my mum or dad because they just panic mode. I mean, my dad was straight away panic mode. So I kept it from my parents for about 3 months, and then they just noticed, well, not noticed, but they said, Andrew, you're not well, are you? So I said no, so I had to break it down to them. And then it's pandemonium. My dad was crying, my mum was crying, and I didn't want that. Right. So I know straight away, now I've got to deal with these guys as well, you know what I mean? So I remember when my dad and my mum come to hospital, and you know, when my dad don't really show emotions when he was here, but I see him welling up. And I said to him, don't cry for me, man. And I remember he said to me, you're going to get through it. You're going to get through it. I done just that, and then I lost him. So it's not easy, but it is what it is.
I definitely found dialysis difficult, but when I got into like 18 months to going up to 3 years, I found it very hard. I was moany, I didn't talk to nurses, I was just hated being there every day. How was dialysis for you?
If I'm honest with you, when I first started dialysis, I found it okay initially. They said to me that, okay, you've got renal failure. It was literally a short gap for me. Right. I didn't know my kidneys were failing. It was like that for me. On dialysis, and I thought, okay, I can't do anything about it, so let me just get on with it. Okay. And I refused to let dialysis define me. And I think, again, going back to our culture, myself, appearing to be strong, so to speak, by nature, others see me and say, okay, well, she's getting on with it, she doesn't need it. And again, it's until I'm on this, where I am now, needing this transplant because I have no access left, it's then that people would start coming forward. So until you're on your deathbed, I don't think some people would give a transplant.
Yeah. For me, this is a perfect time to even shout out the ACLT, because for me, for me, it was just like, go dialysis, at some point you're going to get a transplant. I didn't necessarily know the ins and outs. I didn't know a lot of the technical stuff. I didn't know how long I was going to wait. I just thought, look, I'm in this bed, eventually I'm going to get a transplant. It took for Bev and Oren to come and sit and chat with me and be like, look, this is what's going on. Yeah. And these are the numbers, and this is how long you might have to wait if you don't start. So like, it is the language. Sometimes the doctors don't get through to patients. It is the language, it is who's talking to you. And obviously they culturally will understand me and they'll be able to break it down for me a little bit more.
And I think, that's organizations like ACLT, I mean, they are the key change makers. I mean, they drive the change. Because as individuals, we all want to do things, but there has to be a forum where they can bring all of us together to talk about it and come with new ways of working together and change what we do. So I think that's why every time when they email me or call me, I'm available.
Shae, the younger generation are amazing at like galvanizing, whether it's to cancel someone or like things trending, or like they're together. They have influencers now. I didn't have that when I was younger. Like people that influence people to do stuff. How can we get young people together to preach this message to them so that they can share it to their people as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think like social media is a big thing nowadays. It's much easier to broadcast things, and I feel like young people they just, sometimes I'd say some of them just sit and watch and just let things happen. They don't really participate and share enough things. So I feel like young people young people have a big influence on a lot of things, a lot of people. So I feel like young people need to share things on social media, definitely. I think talk about it much more.
What is the process for overseas donors?
So, I mean, the reason we set up, which was 20 years ago now, is that a lot of our families are abroad. So we wanted to make sure that the family, extended family, has an opportunity to come and donate. And the process is very set. And we do mandate that they have a local doctor to look after them. So we do follow them up indirectly through a local doctor. And really, they just have to have some few blood tests and a scan to make sure that they've got 2 kidneys. Then the results are sent to the doctors or the clinical teams. Then we support them to get a visa for 6 months. So they come here, all the tests are done free, and then they go through the procedure. We look after them until the point they're here, and then they go home. So the process is very streamlined.
Dela, can you explain the Apollo 1 test?
Oh, Apollo 1 test. We've talked about the rigorous tests that we go through, but there's an additional test if you're from the Black, tell me if I'm wrong, the Black Afro-Caribbean community. And that's because genetically we're more disposed to having kidney disease in the future. So that was almost the determining test whether I could be a donor. So it's just a simple blood test. And what that determines, the markers that come back will determine whether possibly in the future I might be disposed to kidney disease. So when my markers came back, it showed that even though with 2 kidneys I was fine, if I was to donate one to my brother, there was a possibility in 10, 15 years there might be a risk that I might develop kidney disease myself. So there's no point in having my brother walking around all healthy and then I develop kidney disease. So that was one of the reasons why I couldn't donate. And I think that's very, very crucial for our community, because that's one question that always comes up. Well, supposing I get kidney disease in the future, well, we've now got this test in place. And I think, have I hit that on the head?
Absolutely, that's well said, actually. It's just to protect the person who's willing to do an amazing thing.
I don't think we've really gone into what living with kidney failure looks like. How has it changed your life?
I have to say it's changed my life immensely. You have to look at what you eat, have to look at what you drink. Your urine output goes down. And, for instance, one day you're feeling great. You arrange to go out with your friends. You call them at the last minute to say, do you know what, I can't make it. I'm just not feeling great.
I think, we talk about renal failure, and we're talking here, Andy Cole's here and Shae's here and you're here, we're all here. We don't necessarily talk about the lives that are lost because of renal failure.
Nationally, the prevalence is number of people, if you take that as a percentage, that's about 13 to 15% of people develop kidney failure. That is the end stage of kidney failure. Right. So these are the people getting close to 15% of the kidney function. People who are of Black and ethnic minorities, they die sooner. And that is simply because the number of people with diabetes is increasing. High blood pressure is increasing in the communities. So therefore, those diseases are more aggressive than somebody who has a sickle cell. So therefore, that's why the early engagement is absolutely key. Going on dialysis for them will shorten their life.
How much of the NHS putting into the initial causes of renal failure, diabetes and high blood pressure? We haven't even mentioned that today, which is a lot of the cause of renal failure.
I'm glad that you asked, because that shift literally happened 2 years pre-COVID. Before that, it was kidney disease, it's a problem, it's going to be fine. There was a big shift was because of patient organizations such as this, to bring the highlight to the kidney disease, how impactful it is for the patient, the families, and to the NHS as a whole. So now there is a lot of attention has been given to getting more transplantation, to the extent that we all publish our data. And the other passion of mine is the innovation, to look at how we can make quality of life better. So now the NHS and globally, there's more awareness that we can use innovative solutions. So we developed products for the patient's self-care at home. The dialysis machine, which used to be a size of a big fridge, now it's the size of a small fridge. So people can do a lot more with it.
People be like, oh, it's fine, we don't need to donate because they're going to have artificial kidneys soon.
No.
No.
I mean, the reason I say that is I think what God made is we can't replicate that.
Of course. Has anyone got a message for anybody out there that is contemplating being a living organ donor?
I'd say look into it, actually. Get as much information on it as you can, and the decision you make will then be an informed decision rather than a decision just coming off the top of your head. Get as much information as you can and don't be scared.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Make sure you understand what you get yourself into. You know, complications, whatever, but once you make your mind up, make your mind up.
I think we've all agreed that the initial conversation is where it needs to start. Do we feel like there's a way of doing this or approaching it with your family and your friends?
To be honest, we as a community, we have no excuse. There's podcasts, there's videos, there's books, there's everything now. So that information is out there. It's a gift of life. You absolutely transform your loved one's life so they can live their best life now. So for me, there's information out there. Get yourself informed, go and get tested, and just transform your loved one's life.
And also your family, you know that your family and friends are on dialysis and they may not have the balls to ask you for that transplant. Help them and support them. And you don't need to say anything to them. Just pick up that phone and just ask them, how are you today? What can I do for you today?
Clinical care point of view, I would say that living with kidney failure is possibly extremely difficult. But one suggestion I make it to patients and their families is that there's no silly questions. You don't need to justify why you need to ask that question. It doesn't have to, it can be about anything. And the system has to get better. We need to get better, or we need to be better to deal with it rather than you need to justify to us why you need to ask the question. That's something I say to my patients. There's no silly questions. You know,
And once you make up your mind as a potential donor to give that kidney away, you're not going to donate tomorrow. You know, there is time for you to learn and understand and ask the questions that you want to ask. And if you're uncertain of something, ask the clinician, ask the potential recipient.
There's so much information out there, like, get as much knowledge as you need, so you know what you're going through, and just share, like, you can save so many lives.